What's up, my money moguls and financiers in training? I am so excited to be back with you. Welcome back to another episode of the Do.Different.Better Show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. On the show, we talk about wealth, wisdom, money moves, and making finance simple for everyday people. I'm so excited for you to join me today. Today, we're going to be talking about something that has been in the news, and I really wanted to take some time to make sure that I'm able to get you some really solid information. Today kicks off a two-part review of President Trump's OBBBA, or the Opportunity and Big Beautiful Bill for America. I'm going to be calling it OBBB just to make it a lot easier. It's a sweeping piece of legislation with big promises, complex challenges, and some serious fine print that will affect how money moves in this country for years to come. I'm going to cover the facts, the numbers, and the real world impact on your bank account, your business, and your community. And let's be real, most people never read the bill. All they hear are the headlines. But what actually changes when something like this passes? That's what we're going to unpack today in plain, simple English. We're going to talk about what's actually in this bill, where it came from, and why you should care, even if you don't follow politics every day. So let's get to it. First, what is the OBBB? In case you've been focused on getting your finances in order because you've been listening to the show, you may have missed the big news from the executive office that will impact every single person. The OBBB is a sweeping piece of federal legislation that passed the Congress, which is our legislative branch. According to the bill, it aims to overhaul specific economic policies, revise tax structures, change funding allocations, and reform certain federal programs. Think of it as a bundle of economic, regulatory, and investment changes all wrapped up in one package. In Washington, they love to give these bills big, bold names, but like a meal at a restaurant, the name doesn't always tell you what's actually in it. So, my job today is to break down what's in OBBB line by line in plain English for you to understand. OBBB was signed into law on July 4th, 2025. This comprehensive legislation aims to reshape various aspects of the federal tax code and financial landscape. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, or TCJA, of 2017 is considered the last major tax reform before the recent passage of OBBB in July of 2025. The official purpose statement in the bill says it's intended to power a series of changes to tax and spending policies, reflecting key priorities of the Trump administration's second term. Supporters argue it will boost economic growth, create jobs, strengthen national industries. However, opponents warn it could widen the deficit, shift benefits toward wealthier individuals or corporations, and reduce funding for key social programs that are still needed to weather the negative economic impacts of COVID and prior legislation. The politics around this bill are super intense because the stakes are really high. We're talking about potentially billions or even trillions in spending, tax changes, and incentives that will affect individuals, small businesses, and entire industries in and across America. So, what's at stake for everyday people? Here's what I want you to lean in on. This bill isn't just about DC power plays. It's about working families. The bill proposes adjustments to income tax rates, changes in credits and deductions. This could mean a bigger paycheck for some and a smaller one for others. In small businesses, there are several key revisions that are related to small business tax reductions, new compliance requirements, expanded or reduced access to certain loan programs, etc. And then, as it relates to communities of color, Historically, major federal economic policies have had uneven impact within Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, often left out of the benefits or bearing a disproportionate amount of the costs of these expenditures. This bill has provisions that could have new opportunities through infrastructure investment or conversely reduce funding to key programs. Now let's talk about poor, rural, and white communities. Changes to agriculture subsidies, rural broadband investment, healthcare funding will directly affect rural economies where many households already operate on very, very tight margins. So now I want to talk about how I'm going to approach this review so you have a general understanding of what we're going to be talking about and how I'm going to approach it. Over these next two episodes, here's the framework we're going to use. First, today in segment one, we're going to get grounded, defining what's in the bill, the political and economic context, and the intended versus likely impact on everyday people. In segment two, I'm going to go deeper into what's really good about the bill, that the provisions that could genuinely deliver great benefits. And in segment three, we'll get into the bad and the ugly, the parts that might be harmful, costly, or create loopholes. Then in episode two, I'm going to talk about when these policies will go into effect, what you can do to prepare or respond, and the specific loopholes businesses and investors might want to leverage legally to maximize their position. By the end of this series, you'll be able to explain this bill to your cousin at the cookout, your team at work, or your investment club, and you'll know exactly where you stand and things that you should be thinking about. So, why does this matter right now? The thing that is important to know is that policy is like a tide. It raises some boats and leaves others stuck in the mud. The OBBB is one of these high tide moments. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a worker, a retiree, a student, the ripple effects will hit your wallet. And here's the thing: when we don't understand policy, we can't really advocate for ourselves. That's why you're here listening to me today. I'm going to strip away the legal jargon. We're going to get to the truth and give you some clarity that you need to make informed financial decisions about your financial present and future. So, what I want to, as now that we've set up our foundation, I'm going to be talking in segment two about some of the good parts of the OBBB. This could be, we're going to be talking about what are some of the wins for working families. We're going to be talking about what this means for small businesses. And there are a lot of intricate things that you're going to need to know as a small business. Now, let me be specific and define small business. I'm going to be using the Small Business Association definition of small business, which is a small business is considered a business that is doing less than $7 million in revenue and has less than 50 employees. I believe that is the most recent definition of a small business. So when I say the word small business, know that those are the businesses that I'm talking about. Now, there is another level below small businesses, which are called micro businesses, and those are typically lumped in with small businesses. But it's important for you to know where are you on the spectrum, and a lot of these policies really impact those folks that are on the higher side of the revenue and higher side of employee size, as opposed to lifestyle businesses, maybe like a content creator or a micro business or main street business that might be your local bookstore or coffee shop or restaurant. So just know that that's what I'm going to be talking about when I say the word small business. So we're really clear about what we're talking about. So there are some benefits, but there are also going to be some really important things that small businesses need to know, particularly businesses that have tipping. This is going to be really super and super important. So, but I'm going to be talking about the OBBB as it relates for small businesses and communities that have been left behind. Some of these provisions could genuinely be transformative, but as always, the devil is going to be in the details. And I've read them, so you don't have to. So I want you to stay with me and come back after the break where we're going to be talking about getting a deeper dive into more of what are some of the overarching scope and landscape of OBBB. And I hope that you have already liked and subscribed. You know that you can hear me live every Sunday at 12 at noon Central Time at AM 950. So don't forget to like and subscribe at AM 950. And feel free to jump over to my YouTube page at Do Different Better, and you can like and subscribe there as well. So once again, we're going to be jumping into segment 2. Stay with me. I will see you after the break. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Do.Different.Better Show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. And if you're just joining us, we're talking about President Trump's The Opportunity and Big Beautiful Bill for America, or what I like to call OBBB. In segment 1, I laid out what's in the bill and why it's going to matter to you, actually to every single person. Now let's talk about the parts that could actually be wins for everyday people, small businesses, and underserved communities if they're implemented well. So, keyword if, right? So just remember that. And it's important to know that not all of these policies that I'm going to be talking about have very strict parameters that have been designed by the IRS. There is still direction that we're waiting for from the IRS as far as some specific definitions, some specific timelines, and things like that. So know that I'm going to keep you posted, but I'm going to give you as much information as I can. But know that some of these policies, which I'm going to cover in the next episode of like when they start and when they expire, but some of them still need guidance from the IRS, and so they're still a little fuzzy and unclear. Okay, but I'm going to give you as much information as I can right now and as simple a form as I possibly can right now. So first, number 1, the idea is that that the OBBB is going to put more money in your paycheck. The OBBB extends the lower individual income tax rate introduced in 2017. Now, what this means is for a middle income household, and a middle income household as defined by the US Census is earning roughly $50,000 to $150,000 a year. This could mean that you could keep $500 to $2,500 more annually. Now, that could be, depending on where you grocery shop, a couple of months of groceries. It could be paying off a chunk of a high interest debt or credit card, or finally starting that emergency savings plan that Elaine's been telling you to start, right? That you keep putting off and keep putting it off. But the real question is whether inflation or higher costs of living will eat into those gains, right? So, number 2, there's going to be a boost for small business. Small businesses get several tax breaks. The bill raises the Section 179 deduction limit for equipment, software, and technology upgrades from $1 million to $1.5 million, meaning more immediate write-offs instead of stretching them over 2 years. It also extends the 20% pass-through deduction for qualified business income, or QBI, to more industries and higher income thresholds. Let's just say you run an LLC or an S Corp or a sole proprietorship. This could mean thousands back into your pocket, depending on your revenue, which is money that you can reinvest into hiring, marketing, or new products or market expansion. Number 3, opportunity zones expansion. So, a little quick recap or review of opportunity zone. Opportunity zones were created in 2017 to give investors capital gains tax breaks for putting money into designated economically distressed areas. The OBBB proposes expanding eligible zones and increasing the deferral period on capital gains taxes from 7 years to 10 years. Now, done well, this could mean more housing, more community facilities, and job creation in struggling neighborhoods. But the benefits depend heavily on the guardrails and community involvement. So, one of the things that opportunity zones could be really great for is if you have a local investment co op and you're trying to maintain power or control of what's happening in your community. It's great for local and community investors to hold on to property. But so far, what has happened is it has driven a lot of private equity development in communities. So, once again, you are going to, if this is something, a tool that you want to leverage for your community to keep community control of your neighborhood, community ownership of your neighborhood, this is going to be something that you may want to leverage and you want to get prepared for. The other thing that is really beneficial about expanding the opportunity zones is to drive local manufacturing. So small manufacturing that is community driven. We know that light manufacturing and heavy manufacturing actually drives community development. So this is a really great time if there's an infrastructure project that your community needs. Leveraging the legislation and the benefits of opportunity zones is one way for you to be able to consider doing that. Number 4, rural infrastructure and broadband. The bill allocates 10 billion, that's a billion with a B, over 5 years to the USDA's Reconnect program for rural broadband expansion, plus $5 billion for road and bridge repairs in counties with populations under 50,000. Reliable internet and infrastructure aren't just nice to have, they're economic lifelines, especially when we think about the advent of AI. If you can't even get online, it's very difficult for you or your business to take advantage of how AI could possibly create efficiencies in your business or in your life if you don't even have access to internet. Better connectivity can mean remote job access, meaning somebody who's maybe living 30, 40, 50 miles from a major city hub could now take a remote job, such as customer support, transcription, medical transcription, things like that. It could really open up the doors for remote job access, online education, telemedicine, and more competitive local businesses that are able to be able to sell more nationally or possibly even globally, right? Number 5, manufacturing and energy incentives. Manufacturing provisions include a 10% tax credit for companies that bring production to the United States, plus an accelerated depreciation for domestic factory upgrades. On energy, the bill offers tax credits for natural gas expansion, nuclear power development, and carbon capture technology. Supporters say these incentives will strengthen U.S. energy and independence and create jobs in both traditional and emerging sectors. So, the thing that is really important to understand is that on paper, these are significant. Lowering taxes for middle income households, better tools for small businesses to expand not only their local footprint, but regional and possibly national footprint, which will then drive maybe increased production or service delivery, which then drives their local economy, is great. There's also, the targeted investment in neglected areas and rural connectivity. We know that these are all super, super important things. Now, again, the devil is going to be in the details of how these are carried out. So, one thing that I would definitely share with you is if you are a small business, the opportunity here, especially if you work in any of the industries that are related to the things that I'm talking about, this is the time for you to get certified locally, regionally, nationally. So for women-owned businesses, you definitely want to think about getting WeBank certified, right? That's women owned businesses. This is getting certified with your county, especially as it relates to any designations such as small business, targeted small business, minority owned small business, women owned businesses. These are going to be crucial because it takes a while to get onto the platforms of your local supplier diversity or your municipal supplier portal. It takes a while, right? So start getting on those portals now, start getting set up. So as this money starts to move from federal to state, or even getting on the federal platform, I believe it's the .gov platform, to be able to be set up as a potential supplier, you want to get on there now because the process is not a quick process. So many of these are not going to turn into actual government contracts that are available to small businesses until maybe next year. So start getting ready now to be able to get on these platforms, get yourself set up as a supplier. So when these come, you are ready to bid. Start to learn how to bid for these kinds of jobs. Talk to your local chamber of commerce, talk to your local small business development agency or your local small SBA office to find out, how do I, one, get certified so I can be a potential supplier for the federal government or your local state or county government, but also what's the paperwork that you need to get started? Because if you haven't been good with your paperwork, now's the time to get good with the paperwork so that you are in a really good position to bid for some of these jobs. So I've talked about kind of all of the things that this is going to be encompassing, but it also is going to be providing some good job boosting manufacturing incentives. So once again, think about what's happening in your community. Are you really thinking about a job transition change, and you want to get into manufacturing? Maybe you're a young person listening to this show and you're thinking about your career options, really thinking about, if you're living in a community, there could be some economic opportunity as far as jobs goes. So think about, what are the jobs that might be coming to your community as a result of OBBB? Once again, it's going to be manufacturing. It's going to be anything related to the internet. There are things that are related to energy. So if you're a young person, I would encourage you to think about getting educated in some kind of energy focused or technological broadband installation. Maybe that's a career. Or maybe you're a mom and you want to get out of your, what you might be thinking is a dead end job that has no financial mobility. There's a lots of programs that are in your local city, state, and county that will pay for you to be retrained into one of these jobs that are going to be coming available in the next 12 to 24 months as a result of OBBB. So this is the way that you can start to leverage, knowing now what OBBB is going to be making its investments in, and how this can relate to your career transition, your small business growth, or understand how your community might be changing and evolving as a result of the investments that are going to be put into the OBBB, right? But as with anything, the devil is going to be in the details of how these programs and how these incentives are actually going to be leveraged, either by your city, by your county, by your township, and quite frankly, by the federal government. Because while the OBBB highlights some of these things, not all of them are clearly defined as to how they will actually be executed. So you're going to want to keep listening to the show, because I'm going to keep you posted on as many of these things as possible. But feel free to ask me a question, send me a DM either on Instagram or on my YouTube channel, to be able to, I can answer some questions either on the show, or I can answer questions in the comment section. But it's really going to come down to the fine print as far as who's going to qualify for some of these opportunities and benefits, how the funds are going to be distributed, and whether there's actually going to be oversight. That's going to be super important. Right now, the way that some of the bill is written, there's very little oversight into any of these things other than what might be outlined by typical tax structure or the IRS. Anything, and even some of the things that are in there, the IRS still needs to provide guidance on, to make sure that you are in compliance and making sure that you do not get yourself stuck in a situation. Because I will just tell you, you do not want to go through an audit. Okay, I don't want that for you, right? But so really wanting to make sure that you understand the things that are coming down the pike. But these will really determine if some of these policies or all of these policies really help Main Street or just pad the corporate bottom line. So, now, what we've talked about today, I've talked through the sort of 10,000 or maybe 7,500 foot outline of the scope and scale of the bill. There were five major pieces that we talked about that are going to influence, once again, every single person in United States. There is no person who will not be touched by this bill. So I just need you to know and understand that. So, as we transition into segment three, I'm going to get into the bad and the ugly, and the loopholes, the unintended consequences, and the hidden costs. Because in policy, what you don't see in the headlines can matter just as much as what you do see in the headlines. So, stay tuned. I want you to come back and see me in segment three. I will see you after the break where I show you how to OBBB better. Welcome back to the Do.Different.Better Show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, and we are in the final segment of our part one breakdown of the Big Beautiful Bill, or OBBB. In segment one, I talked about what's in the bill and why it matters and who it's going to affect. In segment two, we covered all the things that are great about the bill, the provisions that could be real wins for families, for small businesses, and for communities. But I'm always going to keep it 100 with y'all. So I can't just talk about the good without talking about the bad and the ugly, the parts of the bill that could have hidden costs, some unintended consequences, or just plain old loopholes for those already at the top. And maybe for some of you who are aspiring to get to the top. But I'm going to get into it. So let's go ahead and get started. So, number one, who's really going to get these big tax breaks? While the OBBB extends tax cuts for working and middle class families, and I shared with you what we talk about when we're talking about middle class, the using the IRS code, which is that families that are making $50,000 to $150,000 as a combined household, right? The largest dollar benefits are still going to go to the higher earners. That's because when your income is bigger, a percentage based tax cut is worth a lot more money. So, yes, you might see a few hundred or a couple $1,000s more in your pocket. Before a millionaire, it could be a saving of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that has the possibility of actually widening the wealth gap, particularly over time, exponentially, right? So, what will happen is the wealth gap is just going to create this expansion because that wealth is going to exponentially multiply. Remember, we talked about compounded interest? Well, this works the same exact way. The wealth is going to be compounded because let's say you are saving $100 and you invest that $100 as opposed to somebody who gets a $10,000 tax break and they are investing that same $10,000, their money is going to exponentially multiply at a greater rate and scale by the nature of it being a larger amount of money. So over time, we could really start to see a big, huge gap between the haves and the have-nots. Second, as it relates to opportunity zones without guardrails. We talked about the potential of opportunity zones in segment two and how there really is a great opportunity for community investment, for cooperative investment, for local investment to really shape and influence what's happening on the ground in the communities. But here's the ugly truth. There is no oversight with opportunity zone funds or opportunity zone investments. And without strong oversight, these zones could turn into real estate gold rushes that push out the very people they were meant to help, or at least on the face of it, seemed like they were supposed to help. We've seen it happen before. Developers will swoop in and property values rise, rents rocket, and the original residents are forced out of the community. So that's something for you to think about. And this is why it's so important. If you are driven by community investment or community opportunities, this is something you definitely want to take advantage of, right? The OBBB's expansion of opportunity zones could accelerate that in some areas if accountability measures aren't enforced. Okay. Next, number 3. There are cuts that could come later. So, tax cuts sound great on the face, right? But we can be duped into a false sense of security around tax cuts, either by our not knowing and understanding our particular tax bracket. It could be like not understanding the timing and the present and future implications of the tax cut on us as an individual, or on us as a business, or on us as an institution, right? So, once again, tax cuts sound great until you remember that the federal budget still has to balance somehow. If the OBBB reduces revenue without a plan to replace it, that could lead to spending cuts down the road. And it could lead to us having a bigger deficit than we already have, right? And we've already had a number of increases to the deficit. And so, or this, and this setting the ceiling further and further higher, which puts us in a very, as an economy, as a national economy, puts us in a very vulnerable position. And we're already starting to see this happen when we see foreign investors coming and buying up property, when we have foreign investors who are buying our debt. You really want to look at and think about, China owns a lot of America's debt. So, what are the implications if we continue to have these tax cuts without having a plan to generate the revenues from somewhere to pay down our deficit, pay back our debtors? America has debtors, just like you maybe have debt or a credit card. So does the federal government. And so, when we make these tax cuts, we could be jeopardizing ourselves, just like you could jeopardize yourself if you borrow too much or you borrow more than you can pay back. You over leverage yourself. That's when you hear us talk about the debt ceiling, or you hear us talk about the deficit. That's what we're talking about. We are spending more than we make or sell, and we have higher debt than we can actually pay for, which is also driving us, driving the economy, could drive the economy, couldn't drive inflation, can drive its recession, et cetera, et cetera. So this is why it's super important to really understand where these tax cuts are coming from and how the national federal budget is going to be balanced in order to replace that income. But this could, once again, lead to more spending cuts down the road to very key departments or key agencies or key programs that are needed. And historically, cuts often start with the social programs like education, like healthcare, and nutrition assistance programs, programs that have disproportionately supported working families, blue collar families, poor families, people of color, and rural families, no matter what color they are. This is when you start to see cuts to FEMA, and we know that because of climate, we are seeing more and more and more disasters in places that have never seen disasters before, both man-made disasters with data centers exploding, as well as natural disasters from Mother Nature, tornadoes hitting, tsunamis. There was a tsunami warning just a month ago in Los Angeles due to some activity that was happening across the globe. So these are the things we want to be we want to be mindful of. Number 4, environmental rollbacks. So the bill push to speed up permitting for manufacturing and energy projects might create jobs. And that's great. We love jobs, right? We want to make sure people are employed. But it could also mean fewer environmental protections, right? And also, are we actually putting in the investment to make sure that our communities are ready to serve in those jobs? And that's usually the missing link. We can create all of these new jobs, but we don't have anybody trained to go into them. So then the projects that are actually meant to help our communities actually get stalled out because there's no one who's qualified to do that job. So without making the investment into the education of getting our workforce educated to move into these jobs, we could see some stagnation and some other environmental impacts of these projects that are just sitting and they're not getting to completion. Shortening the environmental review timeline may help businesses break ground faster, but it also means less time to catch potential risks to air, water, and public health. And we've seen this happen over and over and over again. You may have seen, where there has been people whose water is, set ablaze. They can literally set their water on fire coming out of the faucet. We've seen environmental impacts where the whole entire communities contract cancer, right? Disproportionately, 80, 60, 70, 80% of a community is diagnosed with the same cancer. Those are all environmental impacts. And once the damage is done, it's expensive and sometimes impossible to reverse. And I can just tell you, as many of my family members are cancer survivors, the financial implication is devastating when you have to go through that kind of um, recovery. And also thinking about the land. The land could be tainted and not usable or livable, inhabitable. So these are all the things we want to think about if we are saying that, if we are okay with the timeline of EPA or environmental review periods being significantly shortened. Okay. Now, number 5, let's talk about the loopholes for the well advised. So, here's one of the oldest truths in Washington: the more complex the bill, the more ways there are to game the system. So, tax attorneys and big corporations will be studying this bill line by line to find legal ways to minimize their liabilities. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing, right? So I want to be clear, right? The whole idea is hopefully you're minimizing your liability so that you can reinvest in your company, which means you can hire more people, which means you can create new technology or create new interventions that actually continue to drive jobs, continue to drive growth in your company, right? So, but sometimes in ways regular people can't access these things. And the language you can't expend as a small business, you cannot afford a big tax attorney or tax strategist. So that's is what, and you, that way you cannot access these loopholes that are readily available to these larger corporations. That's not illegal, but it does mean that the playing field isn't level, right? So, as we start to think about, what is it that we want and how these are things are going to be impacting us, it's really, really important that we understand that if we're a smaller corporation or smaller company, LLC, really understanding how you might be able to benefit from the loopholes. I think this is where, once again, tapping into some of your local resources. Once again, this is really great. If you're a small business, having somebody who is a mentor that is in a big corporation to learn how can you leverage some of these opportunities in for your small business. I think having a CFO as a friend is a really great opportunity for you to be able to learn and leverage where are the ways that you can also take advantage, because a large part of this is, one, you just don't know, right? As a small business, as you don't know any of these things. And the goal is not for you to now become a tax expert or be an accountant, but you do want to be able to leverage your business the best way that you know how to grow and scale your business. Because once again, if we're able to grow and scale our businesses, we're able to grow and scale our communities through jobs, through investment, through philanthropy, and make our communities exactly the way that we would like them to be thriving, young people growing, young people having jobs, and having financial security and financial mobility across our communities, right? So let's now kind of slide into home base for this first segment, okay? So here are some takeaways. The OBBB has some provisions that really could genuinely help everyday people, but the risks are real, and I don't want to undermine those. Benefits may be skewed toward the wealthy. Investments could displace vulnerable communities, and revenue losses could mean future cuts to public services, important key public services. And environmental safeguards could continue to be weakened. And complex rules do create advantages for those who can afford top tier legal and tax strategy advice. It's a reminder that policy wins aren't just about what's promised, they're about how the rules are actually written, who actually can play the game, and who is left watching from the sidelines. So, I really hope that this is giving you something to think about as it relates to no matter where you live, no matter who you are, no matter what your socioeconomic class is, there is something in this bill for everyone to be aware of and be very, very vigilant about how might it impact you directly. This is one of the policies, one of the things that I like to talk about, or I like to say, is that generally federal policy doesn't necessarily touch you directly. Those policies that touch you and impact your daily life usually come at the local level, whether it's city or state. This is one of these instances where, again, this will touch every single human being in the United States, no matter who you are, no matter who your social economic class is. It is going to be something that is going to impact you. So, really understanding how this might implicate your community, which then directly impacts you, how this might influence the state spending, your city council spending, could be impacted and most likely will be impacted by this bill. It will influence how your community is shaped, right? So definitely, I encourage you, this is the time, if you've never gotten involved in your local, what's going on in your local community, this is a great time for you to get involved into, go to the town hall meetings, go to your local city council meetings, and really understand how this might impact how your community is designed, how your community grows, or how it doesn't grow, and working with your local elected officials to contribute to like making the community really have an economic thrive and financial mobility that then secures your financial future, no matter what age you are. Whether you're a baby boomer and you're getting ready to retire, but you want to leave something for your grandchildren, this could impact you. Or maybe you're a Gen Zer and you're new to the workforce and you're trying to figure out what's a good career, solid career for you to go into, because the implications here, once again, the last major tax changes were done in 2017. So almost, what's that, 8 years ago? So, and when we will see another tax change, who knows? So these could have very long lasting implications that we will continue to feel the influence and impact of for years to come. So now is the time to buckle up and get prepared and figure out, what does this mean for you, and what might be the strategies you need to be able to do that. So that is it for part one of OBBB today. Today, I've laid out the lay of the land, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, in episode two, We'll get into the when different parts of this bill will take effect, and how you and your business and your community can prepare and say yes to the legal loopholes businesses might use to your advantage. Because if the game is changing, you need to know the rules, not just survive, but to win. I am your host, Elaine Rasmussen, and you're listening to the Do.Different.Better Show. It's so great to have you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit me up on Instagram, send me a DM, send me your burning questions. Let me know. I'm going to start doing some Instagram live streaming and YouTube streaming. So definitely I'll give you some opportunities. I'll make some announcements about that, but definitely follow me on Instagram at Do Better with Elaine, and I will make sure that you are up to date on all of the times when those Ask Me Anything sessions are going to be open and available. But thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to join me for episode part 2 of the OBBBA, and I will see you next time when I show you how to do different better.